When Claire Whitfield was 12, she won a statewide essay competition. Her parents glanced at the trophy for 4 seconds before turning back to console her brother Dylan because he'd been benched during a junior varsity baseball game. A few years later, Dylan wrecked their father's truck while driving without a license. Her father paid $11,000 for repairs without raising his voice. But when Claire asked for a part-time job to save for her own car, her mother refused, claiming it would distract from the grades Claire was already maintaining perfectly on her own. Claire's mother spoke about Dylan like a racehorse or a rare coin, an investment worth bragging about, regardless of his actual performance. This structural diagram shows how a family system like this functions. The parental nodes funnel nearly all emotional and financial capital into one central node. This isn't based on what a child does, but on the family's need for that child to be the one who matters. In this environment, a second child who quietly outperforms the favorite doesn't receive praise. She becomes inconvenient to that story. Every time Claire succeeded where Dylan failed, she highlighted the gap between the family's myth and the reality. To protect the investment they made in the son, the system registers the daughter's competence as a conflict that needs to be managed. When a child's excellence threatens the family narrative, the parents are left with a single operational choice. They edit that child out of the story. They stop asking questions. They stop noticing. They wait for her to become invisible, so the focus can return to the child they've chosen to value. That editing process became literal when Claire was 26. She was handed an eviction notice for an apartment where she'd never missed a single payment. Her brother had exploited a loophole in a shared account to redirect 4 months of her rent into his own gambling debts. He even spoofed the confirmation emails so she wouldn't see the money leaving her account until the landlord showed up at her door. Claire didn't go to her parents with a plea for help. She went with the transaction history. She stood in the kitchen where she'd grown up and presented Dylan with the digital proof of the theft. He looked her in the eye and told her he had no idea what she was talking about. Even with the paperwork on the table, her mother stepped in to shield Dylan, telling Claire to stop making accusations and think about how this looks for the family. When Claire asked to stay in the guest room for 6 days while she recovered her stolen funds, her parents refused. The room was currently being used to store Dylan's belongings while he renovated the basement. This is the moment the overlooked child realizes that facts are irrelevant. Claire had the receipts, the bank statements, and the legal notice, and it still wasn't enough to outweigh her brother's comfort. If undeniable evidence cannot shift a family's loyalty, then logic is no longer a useful tool. Claire sat in her car in the dark for 11 minutes after leaving that house. She didn't cry. She simply realized that the version of herself that tried to be the helpful daughter had finally run out of options. She decided that from that moment on, she was done asking to be seen. She eventually used the digital trail to reverse the eviction and reinstate her lease, but the paperwork couldn't fix the underlying damage. You can win a legal dispute with documents, but you can't use them to negotiate with parents who would rather see you homeless than disturb their son's flooring project. Claire shifted her strategy from emotional negotiation to resource reallocation. For 26 years, she had invested a massive amount of internal energy into trying to earn a place in her family's narrative. She recognized that this was a bankrupt investment, and she pulled her capital out of it entirely. She took that redirected energy and poured it into the only thing she actually controlled, her professional autonomy. She stopped checking in, stopped explaining herself, and stopped waiting for a permission she was never going to receive. When you stop trying to fix a system that is designed to overlook you, you regain a surprising amount of focus. For Claire, the end of her family's story was simply the first day of a plan she would spend the next 2 years executing in total silence. Her first move was a calculated risk. She volunteered for the Beaumont retail account, a client so toxic and demanding that 4 other managers had quit trying to handle it. Her firm's director warned her that failing on such a visible account could end her career. Claire took it anyway, because she finally understood the difference between being safe and being seen. Quiet success had kept her invisible her entire life. If she was going to move forward, she needed to be in a position where the results were too loud to ignore. She spent 4 months essentially living at the client's headquarters, learning their operational flaws and proposing a total restructure of their strategy. Well, it worked. Sales jumped 18%. The client signed a 3-year extension, and Claire used that leverage to launch her own boutique consultancy, Whitfield Strategy Group. During this transition, her lead client told her something that became her new operating principle. Confidence isn't a feeling you wait for. It is something you generate by doing the hard thing once and realizing you survived it. Claire kept the entire launch a secret. She didn't call her mother to share the news. She didn't post it for her relatives to see. She was building an undeniable record of success, but kept the evidence to herself until she could control the exact moment it was revealed. 2 years after the eviction, a local business journal named Claire's firm as a finalist for Emerging Business of the Year. An aunt spotted the announcement and forwarded it to Claire's mother, who called 3 days later, not to apologize for the past 2 years of silence, but to ask if she and Claire's father could attend the ceremony. Claire agreed, but on one condition. The invitation was for her parents only. She explicitly excluded Dylan, refusing to let him attach himself to her success the way he had attached himself to every other family narrative. She was forcing her parents to see her in a room full of people they respected, without their usual distractions. When her name was called, Claire stands at a podium and looks out at 300 people, including her parents. She gave a speech about building something from nothing during the 2 hardest years of her life, specifically mentioning the moment the people who were supposed to catch me chose not to. By making that statement on a public stage, she took away her parents' ability to keep her story small. They could no longer pretend she was just fine, or that the eviction hadn't happened. The undeniable proof of her success and their failure was now a matter of public record. The family dynamic didn't miraculously heal overnight. After the news feature aired, Dylan called Claire for the first time in years. He didn't ask about her business. He asked to borrow $800 for a car repair. For Dylan, the narrative hadn't changed at all. He still saw his sister as a resource to be tapped. Her mother, however, finally sent a message that acknowledged the reality Claire had lived for decades. Take a look at this data. It shows a common pattern in families. As a child's competence and independence rise, the parent's perceived need to provide support often drops to 0. Her mother admitted she had spent Claire's entire childhood assuming she was fine simply because she was resilient, effectively ignoring the child who needed the least but deserved the most. Claire's agency now has 14 employees and multiple offices. She owns her home and interacts with her parents on her own terms, while remaining entirely detached from her brother. She didn't get an apology that fixed the past, but she got something more durable, a life that no one else can take credit for. Being overlooked by the people who were supposed to see you isn't a reflection of your value, it's a reflection of their limitations. When you stop waiting for them to recognize your worth and start building your own undeniable proof, you stop being a character in their story and finally start writing your own.